Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you so much for clicking on this interview. I'm here with Kyle Chomei Helou. He is, well, a man of many talents. He's a full-time Shotokan karate instructor, and he was a graduate of the which university? It was Villanova, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Villanova
Villanova
University.
University.
In 1993, you got your bachelor's degree in philosophy and with an emphasis on Far Eastern philosophy. You have your master's instructor license from Shotokan Karate, and you also have your master's shihan license in Japanese shakuhachi flute. Is there anything you don't do?
Well, mm, it's there's a lot of things that I would love to hopefully one day be able to do, and hopefully time will allow for me to be involved with as many things. But certainly learning Japanese writing and kanji and calligraphy is on my agenda of things to do. And hopefully one day I'll be able to get into that as well.
Yeah, I really wish I could do calligraphy because that's actually something I've taken a few lessons on it, and it's so calming, and I just enjoy that time. Like an hour flies by and it didn't feel like anything.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to start. We'll start with shakuhachi and that full whirlwind of events. But I do want to get into the Shotokan karate stuff because you do have a huge career in that, and you have many students, and you're doing so much work in that. So yeah, how did you get into shakuhachi in the first place?
It's funny. I walked into a few situations where the shakuhachi was being played or heard. The first one was in the late 70s. I heard it in the anime show Grandizer.
Oh, okay.
And that basically got me curious about the sound. Fast forward about 10 years or so, I got into synthesizers, and I didn't really know what the instrument was called back when I heard it in the 70s. And then I got into synthesizers and started shuffling through the sound banks and came across a sound that really sounded like what I had heard, and eventually realized, looked down, it was called shakuhachi. Fast forward another few years as a university student, a friend of mine invited me to attend a concert, and I had no idea what kind of concert it was. And there it was, Japanese traditional music. And there was a shakuhachi player on stage. And then I approached him at the end of the concert, and he said, "This is the shakuhachi." And so that's basically when I discovered what the instrument looked like. Eventually sought one out at a music store, but it really was not a real shakuhachi. It was just something made of bamboo that had five holes, but the tuning was just very different from anything that we know today. And so that was just one small baby step at a time. And then I eventually got into, I went to visit a friend in San Francisco, and around 94 or so. And I was walking through Japantown, and I saw a real bamboo shakuhachi, and I decided to buy it. And I bought it. So there was no internet back then, and I didn't really know how to find a teacher or anything like that, until I eventually just gave up on trying to find someone to help me and started making sound on my own. But it took me a long time. Eventually, through various people who led me to some teachers. I found a teacher in Princeton, New Jersey, Stephen Rowland, who eventually got me up and running with lessons and playing.
And so afterwards, after you started with Stephen Rowland, you also studied with Christopher Yomei Blasdell, as well as Sogawa Kinya. And I'd like to ask you about your lessons with all three of them. How did you like the lessons in general, and what was your overall impression of the teaching style? And I want to ask this in the kind of the perspective of you studying karate, because you spent 10 years in Japan studying karate, and you know the Japanese system very well on how things are being taught. How were things similar and different? Because you got to study with two Americans and one Japanese man. How were the lessons any different in terms of stylistically approaches, and how are they similar and different in the karate approach?
Yeah, I think one of the main methodology for learning Japanese arts is through silent perseverance.
Mhm.
And so this kind of learning, basically, where you're engaged, body, mind, and technique, all with the focus on the task at hand. And you're basically looking and observing what the instructor is doing. And so this methodology of basically replicating, for many people, it might be a bit of a misconception whereby it leaves no room for freedom or for freedom of expression.
Mhm.
But simply, basically, when you're learning the essential elements of any art, you need to learn the fundamentals, the essential elements that basically can help you can serve as a pedestal from where you can launch yourself onto higher grounds. And so to me, that really sunk in really well, and it was in line with my methodology, with my my search. You know, I grew up in Lebanon here during the war, and it was quite chaotic. And so there was really no system of that we could adhere to attain learning and inner peace and whatever. And of course, going through school and growing up in a loving and caring home had a really positive impact. But what I saw in this Japanese methodology for learning, replicating essential elements until you eventually internalize them and make them part of your uh, uh, learned instinct, if you may call it, basically, making it a learned instinct from where you can basically propel yourself onto higher levels of performance. So to me, that really just it was exactly what made sense. And it had a methodology, literally. I mean, a system of learning, very methodical, step-by-step learning. And I experienced it with Stephen Rowland. He was very meticulous about details, sound production, pitch production, connection between notes, connection between phrases, and then going to Christopher Yomei Blaisdell in Tokyo, and then Sogawa Kinya as well around the same time. There was the same methodology, all engulfed with lots of empathy and love, which is really very important in the life of any learner, to be surrounded and engulfed with a lot of love and empathy. Because at the end of the day, we were still beginners. As good as we might become, we are always beginners, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. And I really do like it when teachers empathize, because as a student, we know that it may not seem like it at first, but they also went through the same struggles that we go through. The first note, everybody goes through that struggle. And when someone really helps walk you through it in a very caring way, it makes learning the instrument much, much more enjoyable, but you also instill the love for the instrument and the craft as well. Now, I'm sure that you're familiar with the aesthetic principles of Shin, Gyo, Sol. So
Shin, heart, Kyo is
Shin is the perfection, like a picture. Gyo is kind of like a mixture between perfection and imperfection, and Sol is the character for grass to grow freely and to spread. That's usually the way that I view this, is that you start with this perfection, a mere image of what your teacher does. And then you start to experiment by adding in your own things and working with your teacher to create some sort of individual voice. And then afterwards, you move to this final stage of soul, where it's completely like nature. It spreads and it grows how it needs to, and it starts to express itself in a way that's very individualistic. I've always felt that very strongly, especially in calligraphy. It's very, very obvious. You can see that sort of things. It's a little bit more literal, but in the Shakuhachi sense, it feels a lot more figurative, and it's very beautiful the way that lines up that way. But I do agree that there is that big misconception of it is there is the way, you do the way, and that's it. It just stops right there. But there is this whole level of freedom of expression through sound. And listening to especially your long flute recordings, it's so apparent that you have the sincerity of sound. especially on that 2.7, I believe it is. I mean, it's a monster size. And when you get to play in the dojo and you get all that reverb, it's so beautiful. So really, congratulations on that sound. It's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to ask, we'll go back to Shakuhachi in a little bit, but I do want to know a little bit more about the karate and how you have so masterfully intertwined the Shakuhachi with it.
Yeah. To me, when I started training in karate, it began as seeking knowledge for self-defense. I was really stunned by the idea that one can defend themselves with the use of their bare hands and no weapons. And very quickly, within 3 months or so from my training, I was very much engaged in training. I was training about 4 to 6 hours a day right from the start, from day one when I started training karate. This was my commitment and my involvement in that art. I very quickly discovered that it was about much more than just self-defense. And to me, it was about the breath, how we breathe, how we inhale, how we exhale guides our movement. And one wrong breath could basically mean in the traditional way, the samurai kind of a way, could mean the end of life as we know it. And so basically, the expression of breath for me through training, how to manage my breath, manage my oxygen intake, the distribution of breath and oxygen throughout the various parts in my body, that became my essential element of training. Of course, there was a lot of technical aspects that needed to be learned, but to me, it was equal in breath as it was in technique. And so when I discovered the shakuhachi, the actual instrument, I had already started training karate. It was about maybe within 1 or 2 months apart from each other. Again, I was seeking sound, the sound I had heard back in the 70s. I was basically seeking that, but eventually I discovered that it was much more, it was about much more than just sound. It was more about what you do in order for the sound to come out, which is basically you got to inhale. And when you inhale, you're taking in oxygen into your body. You're finding a way to manage it so that it can guide your exhale into sound. And basically, my exhale is guided into a technique in karate, and the same way my exhale is guided into sound in shakuhachi. And for me, that was really the link. I'm still discovering a lot of things about the connection between the two. And many of these things I'm discovering are very difficult to put into words. It's mind-boggling. I get this overload of information to the point where I just surrender completely. And all I do is just train, either karate or pick up my shakuhachi and just exhale. So to me, that's really what it is. I hope one day to be able to sit down and to just, sort it out, this real element of, but I think it's quite simple. I mean, when you inhale, you're getting oxygen into your body, and a lot of things begin to happen that change the way your body is, the chemistry of your body, the way it is formed. There's a really wonderful research being done today by Wim Hof. I'm not sure if you've heard of the name Wim Hof, but basically, for me, he has taken things into the scientific realm, and a lot of that, what Azumi-do was talking about back in the 60s, I've had access to certain performances. He's had videos of these performances where he's just literally talking about oxygen and oxygen intake, and how you distribute the oxygen throughout your body can determine the longevity of your health, the reduction of your stress levels, the relaxation of your brain, so that you're able to be calm and make wise decisions about certain things of impact. And so the calm mind is the mind that is able to be calm through the storm and make the wise decisions when it's needed to do that. So all these aspects are of great interest to me, and I'm always constantly delving deeper and deeper into them.
You know, a lot of times when I've talked to people, both Japanese player and foreign players, about shakuhachi and breath, um, it's along those same lines. And when I was studying taekwondo and karate, one of the things that it just hit and occurred to me now, as you're talking about the breath and how much it links to the mind, or well, access and control of the mind, is I remember there would be times that we'd get into we'd be training and we'd get upset at each other, and it would get into a little bit more of a real fight rather than training. And our sensei would break it up and put us to the side and say, "You guys need to take 3 big breaths and hold it." And it's amazing how fast I guess I'm remembering it, like as at being 12 years old and being so worked up and breathing really hard and fast, to breathing in, holding it, exhaling, breathing in, holding it, exhaling, and all those feelings of like, I want to beat this guy up, just completely went out of my mind. And so I think that it's so simple, but we don't even really realize it. And I think that the simplistic things in life evade us so easily because they're overlooked. So I think definitely you're onto something, and I would be so interested to see where you take all this stuff and how simple the thing is that we're all missing.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It's wonderful to know that there's other people as well with similar frame of minds and similar interest. It really brings a bit of light into the journey. Sometimes it tends to be a bit lonely, and being the only person doing this kind of work and search. But I think we're all on the same path, if probably parallel paths at the very most, looking after and seeking after similar things. So I'd be happy to share more and also learn from you some of the things that you have discovered, and perhaps any insights that you might have on the breath and how it guides our activity, whether it be karate or shakuhachi or anything else that we do in life.
I don't know how much I could teach you, but I know that through wonderful through wonderful discourse, I think that's where the brilliance of two minds are better than one, because it's not two minds working separately, it's two minds fighting out an idea. And even just now, as you're talking to me, I mean, that idea came because you said something, which is really what I think makes the martial arts and shakuhachi it's so wonderful, because you don't do it alone. You're always with the teacher, you're with your fellow shakuhachi players, you're doing duets, you're working on stuff and playing for people, and you're talking about shakuhachi, sharing that love. And then these epiphanies just pop up, and then you go, oh my God, I never thought about this, but there's this thing in this piece, and you can do this. And then the other person goes, oh my God, and what if you did this? And then before you know it, you have this whole entire new viewpoint that had never been thought about before.
Yes.
And just to give you an example, recently I told my teacher that I was going to play, I have a concert coming up in Japan, and I'm doing the Nezasa Hashirabe and Sagariha. And I said I was going to play them one after the other. And then he said, what if you took that ending part of the shirabe, and you didn't go to the low otsu register, and you just stopped at that kan register and went right into sagariha and inserted that piece, and you make this big 12-minute piece, it would fit perfectly. And I started playing it in my mind, and I was like, oh my God, is that what they were trying to do? Is that what that actually means? And like, it's this whole entire new, like, my mind was like, oh my God, I'm back to the beginner stage. And it's so interesting. One of the really interesting philosophical things, and I think you will be able to tell me more about this, for some reason, when we start something and in the beginning and we start learning a little bit of information about stuff, we feel like we know so much about that topic. And then once we know, like, we get our master's degree and our teacher hands us that paper, and we go, but there's still so much to learn. I don't feel like I know anything.
Yeah. This summer, I spent about by the way, what you said about Nezasa Shirabe and Sagariha is a wonderful, wonderful combination to join both pieces at the very end by doing what you just did, what you just said. this summer I went back, and I always get involved with lessons, either with both, well, actually both Christopher Blaisdell and Kinya Sogawa. And he introduced me to 4 pieces of Watazumi Do. The first one is Watazumi no Shirabe. The second one is Dai Bosatsu. The third one is Saji. And the fourth one is Shoganken Reibo. And it was like, where did these come from? Okay, Shoganken Reibo might be a bit practiced by quite a few people, but being introduced to these 4 very breathy pieces, it made me really look back at myself and be like, literally, I'm a beginner again. There's something new. It's always present. The knowledge is never ending, and the biggest form of improvement that can happen is yet to happen, I think. So we're, as seekers of knowledge, we're always discovering new things. And what's most important is to keep an open mind and an open heart. I think the open heart is probably the preferred one, to receive this form of knowledge and not stop at a particular place. And when you do that, I think that's the sign of a true player and a true human being, one that is always seeking to improve themselves and learn, not only for the betterment of themselves, but also for the greater good of humanity, mankind, and our universal oneness that we live in. So this form of consciousness is always evolving, and if we stop it, it's going to evolve with or without us. So if we embrace this change, embrace it, and go with the flow. The flow is, the waves are always changing form. It's never the same wave twice in a row or 2 days in a row. There's always difference in things, and you have to be open-minded to embrace change and evolve with it. And that's how I think that's how we grow.
You know, it's I want to talk a little bit about the open heart, because that's one of my personal struggles, and I think it's mostly an age thing, being very young. We have, you know, hormones that are throwing all over the place. You know, it's much more eccentric. People are much more, you know, ready to, we have that go get 'em attitude. And it's been getting better because I've been trying to train myself to have more open-heartedness, and it's not easy whatsoever. But what I'm sensing from you, and even from just being, you know, thousands of miles away and doing this through, you know, like a kind of a Zoom Skype setup, what's beautiful is I can feel your heart reverberating these sincerities, and like it's like these waves of power that are hitting me, and it's really, really quite magical. And I want to ask you about that. What empowers you to have this, you know, just kind of open, accepting heart? Like, I mean, the love is reverberating so strong, and it's really quite beautiful.
Thank you. And I feel it the same as well, coming across the waves from you as well. Very sincere and very open. I think the biggest element is learning to let go. I've had a good performance, great, let go. I've had a bad performance, great, let go. I had this and that happen to me that day, great, let go. The more you learn to let go, which is very difficult at first, but it's a practice, I think. There's a technique for learning to let go and just becoming like the observer, being this illuminated awareness in the midst of the world in which we live in. It's a practice that needs to take its course, but once you find the simplicity of letting go, the channels will open up and the heart will open up, and you'll be able to not only accomplish more, but let go of things more. I think the more we hang on to things, the more weight it'll add to us, and it'll just drag us down like a balloon trying to be free. It wants to fly up, you know, the helium balloon. When you fill it up, it'll basically go up by itself. But if it's got a weight to keep it down, it'll always stay in place. And for us, it's the same thing. If we just find a way to let go, and it could be as easy as it's done, whatever happened, happened. There's nothing that can be done about it. I love the Japanese saying shoganai, which basically
Yes, shoganai. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you do things of greatness and then you just let it go. Yes, it leaves an impact, and take the lesson from whatever happened and just move on. Not let go in the negative sense, but rather let go in a positive sense, which basically is take the lesson, learn from it, whether it was a positive thing that happened or not such a positive thing, and just move forward with it. And this will slowly begin to open up channels and open up the heart and bring more lightness to your being. This is how I do things for myself. It wasn't easy. I'll be honest with you, it wasn't easy. But my mind, my naive mind, when I first moved to Japan, I was around 26. I experienced a lot of tension in karate training. It was very intense. The level of training was very intense. And the only way for me to just rejuvenate myself and go in fresh to the dojo, I lived actually at Teikyo University. Mm-hmm. It's up in Hachioji. And that's where Shihan Masao Kagawa, he's one of the most sought after Shotokan karate instructors in the world. And Teikyo was known for its most demanding training. It's one of the strongest universities in the world for karate, and they've won the national championships numerous times. And there I threw myself into the lion's den, or the hornet's nest, basically, right from the get-go, moving fresh from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the first 6 months I lived in Japan, I resided there and trained with the karate team there as a guest, not as a student, but as a guest trainee. And it was very demanding. And I began to realize unconsciously that the way I was able to get back into the dojo the next day was just through this form of letting go. It wasn't easy, because sometimes you would be hit the previous day through training and you'd still have scars or pain or whatever. But when you're in the act of training, which is basically renshu in Japanese, which is the repetition, this kind of mindful but mindless, where the mind is not really engaged, your body is on autopilot. You're just going in and doing the repetition. This form of repetition basically trains your mind and body to stick to the drill, stick to the routine. And the more I did that, it was a practice. It was a form of learning to let go. I had the option of turning my back and just quitting and leaving, of course. And many days after training, Kagawa Shihan would ask me, "Are you sticking to it, or are you gonna go back to the US?" And I would just, day after day, I would say, "I'm sticking with it. I'm sticking with it." Of course, everybody has the option to turn around and go back. I think we have to all be happy. Had I not been happy doing what I was doing, I would have definitely done something else. And I recommend everybody to seek their own happiness. You need to be happy in this life. If you're not happy, then you have to find it. Mm-hmm. And so I was seeking my happiness through training. And to me, that was my happiness. And so the more I did that, the more I learned to let go. But in simple terms, learning to let go.
Wow. It's really powerful. It's hard to think of what the next thing is to say. It's, like I want that to, really resonate with me for, the rest of the day, the rest of the week, and the rest of my life. That was probably one of the most powerful rant, if I could call it that. Not what I would call it that. I would call it that was the most powerful pouring out of the heart I think I've ever heard. That was really beautiful. Very, very beautiful. Yeah, I don't know how to follow up with that. That was really great. You know, it's just like I wanted to start these interviews because I so badly wanted to learn more. And these interviews have, even though I don't have many of them, but every single time I meet somebody like you, I'm just so humbled. I realize how much knowledge there is in the world and how powerful people can be. Like I feel emotionally affected by the things that you're saying, and it's really just quite incredible. You know, I can see why, you know, your students love you so much and why they really admire you. It's yeah, I mean I'm truly touched.
Yeah, this is my life. It's been like that uh, for 10 years now here in Lebanon. And it was always my dream to one day come back and return to Lebanon. You know, I grew up here in '86. We left, we went to suburban Philadelphia, and I was exposed to a whole world of harmony and order and peace and all that. The complete opposite of what we had experienced here in, unfortunately, our war-torn, beloved Lebanon. Um, and so I thought maybe one day I could come back and be able to offer things that can last um, generations, where people can become independent, self-thinking, uh, peace agents, acting for the greater good of humanity, um, self-sufficient, physically, mentally strong. And so I'm really happy having discovered the forms of knowledge that not necessarily replace what we already have here, because there's a lot of values everywhere, and every culture has great values, but things that supplement and complement. I think cultural arts in general, they create this form of openness and exchange among cultures that uh, create a link between cultures as opposed to divide. And it was the divide that caused our internal strife here in Lebanon. And if we can just cross boundaries between this cultural divide, we would be able to overcome, not through resolution, but simply through understanding. I think if we understand that we are all different and try to embrace this difference, it would lead us a step closer to embracing this difference and just coexisting, finding ways to coexist in harmony and peace, so to speak.
You know, I think the words that are coming to my mind right now, of if I was to sum up some of the things that you're saying, because I mean it's so difficult to these ideas and I think in reality they are very simple, but to find those just exact right words are so difficult. But what's coming to my mind right now is that you are responsible for your own happiness, and you should not put your negative feelings and your bad mood, and you shouldn't put that burden on other people. You know, making yourself happy and is so extraordinarily important. I think that's one of the big things that I'm getting at, that I'm having these words kind of cycle through my head over and over again. So that's definitely, and I have no doubt in my mind that you're going to succeed for that. I think your words, I truly hope you write a book, and because I think that book will be a bestseller, and I think I'll be the first to buy it. I want a signed copy, please. And
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that just talking with you now for, I think it's been like 35 minutes or something like that, maybe a little bit longer. I know that this is going to impact people for generations to come. Absolutely. So
I'm happy.
With that being said, I want to let people know where they can learn more about you, and where they can study with you and stuff like that. So where can people find everything about you?
Well, I'm here in Lebanon. I'm based between Beirut and Jounieh. These two cities are about 20, 30 kilometers away. And I always welcome questions by any form of social media. And I've answered questions to people in all four corners of the world. So if anyone has any questions for whatever concerning karate or shakuhachi, I'd be happy to answer any questions in my time. So they can contact me via Facebook to come and learn at my karate dojo in Beirut or in Jounieh. I teach shakuhachi privately here in Lebanon. I also, in my limited time, whenever I have time, I give Skype lessons, although that's limited now because of my physical commitments in teaching in person. So yeah, that's basically it.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yep, I'll be sure to link that. So you can find him on Facebook. Just type in Kyle Chomei Helou, and it will come right up. And you can add him and start a conversation. This has been enlightening. Thank you so much. And thank you all for the people who watched. And Kyle, we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Sean. I wish you all the best. And I'm really looking forward to our continued communications.
Likewise.
All the best to you. Okay.
Thank you.